Morning sunlight filtered through the high stained glass windows of a grand church, casting colorful patterns onto the stone floors. The sanctuary, usually a place of quiet reflection, buzzed with activity. Preparations were in full swing for an extraordinary event. The Pope himself was scheduled to visit. Priests and volunteers moved about with purpose, ensuring every detail was perfect for the holy occasion. Amid the commotion, a striking Doberman named Buddy stood at attention near the entrance. His sleek coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his alert ears twitched at every sound. Buddy was no ordinary dog. He was a seasoned search and rescue canine, trained to detect danger and assist in emergencies. At his side was Margaret, his handler, an experienced woman with a calm demeanor and a steady voice. Though not elderly, Margaret carried an air of wisdom that made her presence reassuring. The church's head priest, Father Michael, approached with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Margaret, thank you for coming," he said, his voice warm but tinged with concern. "We've taken every precaution, but having Buddy here gives us an extra layer of security. We can't afford any surprises." Margaret gave a reassuring nod, her hand resting gently on Buddy's head. "He's here to help," she replied. "Buddy's instincts are unparalleled. If there's anything unusual, he'll find it." The routine sweep began, with Buddy leading the way through the sanctuary. His sharp nose sniffed the air, detecting faint traces of incense and the polished wood of the pews. The church, though bustling with activity, carried an air of solemnity that seemed to calm even the most restless hearts. Buddy moved with purpose, his focused gaze scanning every corner. As they passed the altar, Buddy paused, his ears perked and his body stiffened, a clear sign that he had picked up on something unusual. Margaret noticed immediately, her practiced eyes locking onto her partner. "What is it, boy?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Buddy let out a soft whine, his nose pointing toward the side chapel. The area had already been inspected earlier that morning, but Margaret trusted Buddy's instincts implicitly. She signaled to Father Michael, who joined them with a furrowed brow. "He's alerting to something," Margaret explained, her tone serious. "It could be nothing, but we need to check." Father Michael nodded, his concern growing. The small group moved toward the chapel, where statues of saints stood in quiet reverence. The air felt cooler here, and the faint scent of lilies lingered from a recent arrangement. Buddy led the way, his movements deliberate as he circled the space. Margaret watched closely as Buddy's behavior shifted. His tail wagged slightly, not a signal of distress but one of interest. He stopped near the statue of St. Francis, his nose pressed against the stone base. Margaret crouched beside him, examining the area with care. "There's something here," she murmured, her hand brushing against the cold stone. But to the naked eye, the spot seemed unremarkable. Father Michael leaned in, his face etched with curiosity and concern. Before they could investigate further, a volunteer entered the chapel, her voice breaking the quiet. "Father Michael, we need you in the sanctuary," she said, her tone urgent. "The decorations for the altar need approval." The priest hesitated, torn between the pressing task and the mystery unfolding before him. Margaret gave him a reassuring nod. "Go," she said firmly. "Buddy and I will continue here." As Father Michael left, Buddy resumed his work, his nose pressed to the floor as he traced invisible paths. Margaret felt a knot of anticipation in her chest. Buddy's behavior was clear. There was something unusual, something hidden, that required attention. Outside the chapel, the sound of choir practice filled the air, their harmonies adding an ethereal quality to the atmosphere. Margaret couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a routine search. It was a mission in a place where faith and hope intertwined. Whatever Buddy had found, she knew it was more than coincidence. Buddy let out a low bark, his nose pressing against a corner where the floor met the wall. Margaret knelt beside him, her fingers brushing against a faint indentation in the stone. Her pulse quickened. This could be the start of something significant. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. "Let's see what you've found." The chapel grew quieter as Margaret focused on the spot Buddy had identified. His sharp nose remained pressed against the corner, his body tense but calm. Margaret brushed away a thin layer of dust, her fingers tracing the faint indentation in the stone. The air around her felt heavier, as if the space itself held its breath. Father Michael returned just as Margaret carefully probed the area with a small tool from her bag. "What have you found?" he asked, his voice low but filled with curiosity. Margaret gestured for him to come closer. "It looks like a panel or compartment," she said, pointing to a barely visible seam in the stonework. "It's well hidden, but Buddy's reaction makes me think there's something behind it." Father Michael knelt beside her, examining the area with a furrowed brow. "This church is over 3 centuries old," he murmured. "It wouldn't be surprising if there were hidden spaces, but why would one be here?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. Instead, she retrieved a flashlight and shone it into the corner, illuminating the faint outline of a stone panel. "There's only one way to find out," she said, her voice steady. Using a small crowbar, Margaret worked carefully to loosen the panel. The ancient stone shifted with a soft groan, revealing a dark, hollow space behind it. The scent of earth and aged wood wafted out, and Margaret's pulse quickened. Buddy let out a low, almost approving huff, his tail wagging slightly. Inside the hollow, a small wooden box rested on a bed of dust and cobwebs. Margaret reached for it, her movements cautious. The box was intricately carved with symbols Margaret couldn't immediately identify, but Father Michael's eyes widened as he took in the ornate designs. "This isn't ordinary," he said, his voice hushed. "These symbols, they're religious. Likely from a time when messages were encoded to protect sacred knowledge." Margaret handed him the box, her gaze shifting to Buddy, who now sat obediently at her side. "He led us to this," she said softly. "Whatever it is, it's important." Father Michael carefully opened the box, its hinges creaking with age. Inside was a bundle of parchment, tied with a faded red ribbon. The parchment's edges were frayed, but the inked words remained legible, preserved by the careful folds and the box's protection. He unfolded the first sheet, his breath catching as he read the Latin script. "Vitae indicator, animarum protector." He paused, translating aloud. "Seeker of life, protector of souls." Margaret leaned closer, her eyes scanning the elegant script. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a blessing," Father Michael explained, "a prayer for guidance and protection, often associated with sacred artifacts or relics." He carefully unfolded another sheet, this one depicting a detailed map of the sanctuary. Several markings stood out, including one near the altar. "This isn't just a prayer," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's a guide." Margaret's heart raced as she looked between the map and Buddy, who sat patiently, his gaze fixed on the box. "Whatever this is, it's not random," she said. "Buddy led us here for a reason." Father Michael nodded, his expression a mix of awe and determination. "We need to follow this. If there's more to uncover, it could be something the Church, and perhaps even the Pope, needs to see." The two of them shared a glance, the weight of the discovery settling heavily between them. They carefully replaced the parchment in the box and secured the panel back in place to avoid alarming anyone prematurely. "We'll investigate after hours," Father Michael said. "For now, let's keep this between us." Margaret agreed, though her thoughts swirled with questions. Who had hidden the box? Why was it so meticulously concealed? And what was its connection to the upcoming papal visit? She glanced at Buddy, who met her gaze with a calm, steady expression. Whatever lay ahead, she trusted him completely. As the day progressed, the sanctuary filled with visitors and volunteers, each unaware of the hidden discovery. Margaret and Father Michael worked silently, their minds consumed by the task that awaited them. Choir practice filled the air with hymns, their melodies carrying a sense of divine purpose. By nightfall, the church was quiet once more. The flickering glow of candles cast long shadows as Margaret and Father Michael returned to the chapel, the wooden box in hand. Buddy walked ahead, his movements confident yet measured. "This is where faith meets action," Father Michael said, his voice steady. "Whatever we find, we must approach it with reverence." Margaret nodded, her grip tightening on Buddy's leash. "And trust," she added. "Buddy hasn't led us wrong yet." With the map as their guide, they prepared to follow its markings deeper into the sanctuary. The air felt charged with anticipation, as if the church itself was waiting for the truth to be revealed. The grand sanctuary, usually silent at night, now echoed softly with Margaret and Father Michael's footsteps as they moved cautiously. Buddy led the way, his nose close to the ground, his posture alert. The faint light of their flashlights danced across the intricate carvings and gilded details of the church's interior. The centuries-old building seemed alive, its walls holding secrets waiting to be uncovered. The map they had found in the hidden box was precise, directing them toward the altar. Margaret held the parchment steady, the faded ink outlining a series of symbols and paths. The markings indicated a location beneath the altar, a place that had been overlooked for generations. As they approached, Buddy stopped abruptly. His ears perked, and a soft growl rumbled in his throat. Margaret knelt beside him, her hand resting on his back to calm him. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Father Michael, clutching a small crowbar and flashlight, stepped forward. "Let's take a closer look," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. He knelt beside the altar, examining its ornate base. His fingers brushed against the smooth stone until they found a slight irregularity, a seam, almost invisible but distinct under careful scrutiny. "This must be it," he murmured, glancing at Margaret. With her nod of approval, he began to gently pry at the seam, careful not to damage the ancient structure. The stone shifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the altar. A rush of cool, musty air escaped, carrying the scent of age and secrecy. Inside, a small chest lay nestled in the hollow space. Its metal edges were tarnished, and its wood was darkened with time, but it was intact. Buddy let out a low bark, his tail wagging slightly as if confirming the significance of their find. Margaret carefully retrieved the chest, placing it on the stone floor. The carvings on its surface were intricate, depicting symbols of protection and faith. Father Michael traced his fingers over the designs, his expression a mix of awe and reverence. "This craftsmanship, it's extraordinary," he said. He unlatched the chest, the metal hinges creaking softly. Inside, wrapped in layers of silk, was a golden medallion adorned with intricate engravings. The medallion shimmered faintly in the dim light, its surface depicting a dove surrounded by rays of light, a symbol of the Holy Spirit. Alongside it was a scroll, its edges frayed but the script still legible. Father Michael gently unrolled the scroll, his breath catching as he read aloud. To be unveiled in a time of great unity, as a reminder of the divine light that guides us. Margaret's eyes widened. This was meant to be found now, she said softly. Ahead of the Pope's visit, it's no coincidence. Father Michael nodded, his voice filled with conviction. This medallion, it's more than an artifact. It's a symbol of hope and unity. Whoever hid this must have foreseen its significance for a moment like this. Buddy sat beside them, his presence grounding them in the moment. Margaret scratched behind his ears, a soft smile on her lips. You did it, Buddy, she said. You found something that could inspire so many. Father Michael carefully rewrapped the medallion and scroll, placing them back in the chest. We need to prepare, he said. This discovery must be shared with the Pope and the Church. It could serve as a beacon of faith during his visit. As they secured the compartment and ensured the area was undisturbed, a profound sense of purpose settled over them. The sanctuary, once a place of quiet reverence, now felt alive with the weight of their discovery. Buddy, ever vigilant, seemed to sense the importance of the moment, his tail wagging gently as he followed Margaret and Father Michael back to the main hall. By morning, the church was buzzing with quiet excitement. Margaret and Father Michael had spent the early hours deliberating on how best to present their discovery. The Pope's visit was less than 2 days away, and they needed to ensure the unveiling of the medallion would be both respectful and impactful. The medallion, now safely stored in Father Michael's quarters, seemed to radiate a quiet power. As Margaret and Father Michael prepared to meet with key church officials, Buddy remained close, his calm demeanor a reminder of the trust and vigilance that had led to the discovery. This isn't just a historical artifact, Father Michael said during their meeting. It's a message, a symbol of faith meant for this very moment. The timing is no accident. The officials, though initially skeptical, were moved as Father Michael explained the medallion's significance and shared the words from the scroll. The medallion's imagery of the dove, a universal symbol of peace, felt especially poignant given the Pope's focus on unity during his visit. It must be presented with care, one official said, nodding thoughtfully. The Pope will understand its importance. As preparations for the event began, the sanctuary was transformed into a space that honored both tradition and the newfound discovery. A special alcove was created near the altar to display the medallion and scroll. The area was adorned with white lilies and soft candlelight, creating an atmosphere of reverence and hope. Margaret, though often in the background during such events, found herself deeply involved in the planning. She worked alongside volunteers to ensure every detail was perfect. Buddy became an unexpected centerpiece of the effort, his presence reassuring and inspiring those around him. Children, in particular, were drawn to Buddy. As they decorated the church with flowers, they often paused to pet him, their laughter bringing a lightness to the sacred preparations. Margaret watched these interactions with a quiet smile, grateful for the joy Buddy brought to such a serious occasion. Father Michael, meanwhile, spent hours in prayer and reflection. The weight of the medallion's discovery weighed heavily on him, but it also filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. "This is why we are here," he told Margaret during a quiet moment, "to serve as stewards of faith and to guide others in moments like this." The evening before the Pope's arrival, the church held a small private ceremony to bless the medallion and the space where it would be displayed. Father Michael led the prayers, his voice steady as he spoke of hope, unity, and the divine light that guided them all. As the candles flickered and the congregation joined in hymns, Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. The sanctuary, so full of history and faith, now held a new chapter, one that she and Buddy had been a part of. She looked down at her loyal companion, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the candles. "You've done something extraordinary, Buddy," she whispered. The night ended quietly, the sanctuary bathed in moonlight as the last of the parishioners left. Margaret and Father Michael stood by the altar, their work nearly complete. "Tomorrow will be a day to remember," Father Michael said, his voice filled with quiet anticipation. Margaret nodded, her hand resting on Buddy's head. "It already is." The morning of the Pope's visit dawned with a sense of anticipation that electrified the entire village. The streets leading to the church were lined with parishioners and visitors, their faces filled with excitement and reverence. Inside the sanctuary, every detail gleamed under the morning light. The medallion and scroll rested in their alcove, bathed in the glow of soft candles and surrounded by fresh white lilies. Margaret stood near the entrance with Buddy, who sat calmly at her side, his posture regal and his eyes scanning the gathering crowd. Children whispered excitedly as they pointed to the dog who had played a role in the unfolding mystery. Margaret smiled softly, her heart full as she stroked Buddy's sleek fur. Father Michael, dressed in his ceremonial robes, paced quietly near the altar. Though he had led countless services and ceremonies in his years at the church, the significance of this day weighed heavily on him. He glanced at the medallion, its golden surface catching the light, and whispered a quiet prayer for guidance. When the Pope arrived, escorted by a small entourage, the congregation rose as one. The sanctuary filled with a warm, welcoming applause that quickly gave way to a respectful silence. The Pope, an elderly man with kind eyes and a serene presence, moved gracefully toward the altar, his gaze taking in the beauty of the church and the faces of those gathered. Father Michael stepped forward, bowing deeply before addressing the Pope. "Your Holiness, we are honored to have you here today, and we are humbled to share with you a discovery that has touched all of us deeply." The Pope listened intently as Father Michael recounted the events leading to the discovery of the medallion. Margaret watched from her place near the entrance, her hands resting lightly on Buddy's collar. When Father Michael mentioned Buddy's role, a murmur of admiration spread through the congregation, and all eyes turned toward the dog. The Pope's face lit with a smile as he motioned for Buddy to be brought forward. Margaret hesitated briefly, then led him toward the altar. Buddy walked confidently beside her, his head held high. When they reached the Pope, Buddy sat obediently, his calm demeanor earning an affectionate pat from the Holy Father. "What a faithful servant," the Pope said warmly, his voice carrying through the sanctuary. "Even among God's creatures we find reminders of loyalty and purpose." The moment was both humble and profound, a testament to the interconnectedness of faith, humanity, and the natural world. Father Michael then guided the Pope to the alcove where the medallion and scroll were displayed. The sanctuary held its breath as the Pope studied the artifacts, his expression thoughtful. He turned to the congregation, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This medallion, hidden for centuries, is a reminder of the light that guides us in times of uncertainty. It is no coincidence that it was found now, as we gather in the spirit of unity and faith. Let this be a symbol of hope for all." The congregation erupted into applause, their voices lifting in celebration. Father Michael and Margaret exchanged a glance, their shared journey culminating in this extraordinary moment. Buddy, ever composed, wagged his tail slightly, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the crowd's admiration. As the ceremony continued, the Pope blessed the medallion and offered prayers for the congregation. The choir's hymns filled the sanctuary, their harmonies echoing through the ancient walls. Margaret found herself overcome with gratitude for Buddy, for Father Michael, and for the opportunity to be part of something so meaningful. That evening, as the sun set and the church grew quiet once more, Margaret knelt beside Buddy in the sanctuary. "You've done more than I ever thought possible," she said softly, scratching behind his ears. "You reminded all of us of what it means to have faith." Father Michael joined her, his expression serene. "The Pope's visit may be over, but the story of this day will live on," he said, "and Buddy's role will not be forgotten." Margaret nodded, her heart full. "He was meant to find it," she said, "just like we were meant to be here." As the final candles flickered and the sanctuary fell into peaceful stillness, Margaret and Buddy left the church together, their steps light with the knowledge that they had been part of something extraordinary. The medallion, now a beacon of faith, would inspire countless others in the years to come, a testament to the unity and purpose that guided them all. If this story of faith, unity, and an extraordinary discovery moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's celebrate the incredible moments where faith and courage come together to light the way.